We now turn to two more major isms that arose in response to the Industrial Revolution: socialism and communism. Both emerged from the belief that industrial capitalism, left unregulated, was unjust, chaotic, and exploitative. Both aimed to create a system that would benefit all of society, not just factory owners and the wealthy. In this video, we will focus on early utopian socialism and several key thinkers before Marx. Early socialists believed that industrial capitalism created an unfair and unequal society. As factories and businesses expanded during the Industrial Revolution, workers often found themselves at the mercy of employers. A single business owner could hire or fire workers at will, set wages without negotiation, and determine long hours and difficult working conditions. While a small number of industrialists accumulated enormous wealth, millions of laborers struggled to survive in poverty. To socialists, this system was chaotic, unjust, and benefited only a privileged few. In response, socialists argued that the means of production, factories, mines, and other sources of economic wealth should belong to the people rather than private individuals. They believed that society should be organized around cooperation instead of competition. Through shared ownership and the fair distribution of goods, they hoped to create an economy that served everyone's needs rather than the interests of a small elite. Ultimately, the goal of socialism was economic equality. Socialists acknowledged that the French Revolution had secured important political and legal rights by establishing the principle that all citizens were equal before the law. However, they argued that true equality could not exist as long as vast economic differences remained. Therefore, they sought to extend the revolution's promise of equality into the economic sphere, creating a society in which wealth and opportunity were shared more fairly among all people. Henri de Saint-Simon was one of the earliest and most influential utopian socialist thinkers. Born into a French noble family, he fought in the American Revolution and later supported the French Revolution. Unlike some critics of industrialization, Saint-Simon believed that industry and technological progress could greatly benefit society. However, he argued that these forces needed to be carefully organized and directed for the common good, rather than left to serve the interests of a privileged elite. Saint-Simon rejected the idea that society should be ruled by kings, nobles, or individuals who inherited their status. Instead, he believed that leadership should be entrusted to those with expertise and practical knowledge, including scientists, engineers, economists, and other intellectuals. In his view, these capable individuals were better equipped to solve social and economic problems and to promote human welfare. He also envisioned a highly organized economy in which production and development were planned on a large scale. Saint-Simon encouraged cooperation across national boundaries and supported ambitious public works projects that would improve transportation, communication, and economic growth. He even imagined projects similar to the Suez Canal long before they became reality. Ultimately, Saint-Simon believed that society should be organized around productivity, progress, and the well-being of all people, rather than around inherited privilege and social class. Charles Fourier was one of the most colorful and unconventional figures among the early utopian socialists. Living during the age of the Industrial Revolution, he was deeply critical of the new industrial society, which he believed was destroying human happiness and replacing fulfillment with drudgery. Unlike thinkers who celebrated economic progress and technological advancement, Fourier was more concerned with creating a harmonious society in which people could live and work according to their natural passions. To achieve this vision, Fourier proposed the creation of ideal communities called phalansteries. Each community would consist of exactly 1,720 people, including one man and one woman from each of the 810 human personality types that he believed existed. Within these carefully balanced communities, work would no longer be a burden. Instead, people would choose tasks that matched their interests and talents, making labor enjoyable and rewarding. Fourier even imagined that unpleasant jobs could become entertaining. In one famous example, he suggested that garbage collection might be performed by boys dressed as clowns riding ponies. He was so confident that people would enjoy their work that he predicted they would eagerly leap out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning to begin the day's activities. Fourier's imagination extended far beyond social organization. He made a number of extraordinary predictions about the future, claiming that Earth would eventually have 6 moons, that the climate at the North Pole would become warmer than the Mediterranean, and that the oceans would one day turn into lemonade. He also envisioned a world overflowing with genius, producing millions of great poets equal to Homer, mathematicians equal to Isaac Newton, and playwrights equal to Molière. Although many of Fourier's ideas seemed bizarre, they attracted followers who attempted to put his theories into practice. Experimental communities inspired by his vision were established in both France and the United States. One of the most famous was Brook Farm in Massachusetts, which was associated with the writer Nathaniel Hawthorne. Despite the enthusiasm of their founders, none of these communities survived for more than a few years. In the end, Fourier's ideas were remarkable for their creativity and optimism, but they proved impossible to sustain in practice. While his schemes for reorganizing society were imaginative and influential, they remained largely unrealistic, making him one of the most fascinating and impractical of the Utopian Socialists. Robert Owen was the most practical and successful of the early Utopian Socialists. Unlike many social reformers of his time, Owen was not simply a philosopher theorizing about how society should work. He was a wealthy Welsh factory owner with first-hand experience managing industrial enterprises. As he witnessed the harsh realities of factory life during the Industrial Revolution, he became increasingly troubled by the long hours, low wages, poor living conditions, and exploitation that many workers endured. Determined to prove that industry could be both profitable and humane, Owen transformed the textile mills he managed at New Lanark, Scotland, into a model industrial community. He introduced reforms that were revolutionary for the early 19th century, including higher wages, shorter working hours, and educational opportunities for workers' children. He also promoted moral behavior through strict regulations on alcohol consumption and other vices. Owen believed that people's character was shaped largely by their environment, and by improving living and working conditions, he hoped to create healthier, more productive communities. The results were remarkable. Rather than harming the business, Owen's reforms increased productivity and profitability. His success demonstrated that treating workers with dignity and providing better conditions could benefit both employees and employers. At a time when most factory owners viewed labor merely as a cost of production, Owen's achievements challenged conventional assumptions about industrial management. Encouraged by his success, Owen attempted to persuade other factory owners to adopt similar reforms. However, most industrialists showed little interest in his ideas. Undeterred, Owen sought to create an entirely new society based on cooperation and shared responsibility. In 1825, he founded the experimental community of New Harmony in Indiana. The settlement was intended to serve as a model for a more equal and cooperative social order. Despite high hopes and considerable public attention, the community struggled with internal disagreements and economic difficulties, surviving only until 1829. Although New Harmony ultimately failed, Owen's efforts left a lasting legacy. The settlement became an important symbol of 19th-century social experimentation and is now recognized as a historic landmark. More importantly, Owen's reforms at New Lanark helped inspire later movements for labor rights, public education, and improved working conditions, making him one of the most influential social reformers of the Industrial Revolution. These early socialist thinkers became known as Utopian Socialists, because they believed that society could be transformed into a more just and harmonious place through planning, cooperation, and moral example, rather than through conflict or revolution. Thinkers such as Saint-Simon, Fourier, and Owen were convinced that human beings could create ideal communities where poverty, exploitation, and inequality would disappear. They sought to persuade people of the benefits of their ideas and often attempted to demonstrate them by establishing small experimental communities that would serve as models for the wider world. Each proposed a different path toward social improvement. Saint-Simon envisioned a society directed by scientists, engineers, and other experts who would organize production for the common good. Fourier imagined carefully designed communities where people would happily perform work that matched their natural interests and passions. Owen focused on practical reforms, showing through his successful factory at New Lanark that workers could be treated humanely without sacrificing productivity or profit. Despite their differences, all three believed that cooperation should replace competition, and that society could be reorganized to promote greater equality and well-being. The next great socialist thinker, Karl Marx, would build upon some of their concerns while criticizing their methods. Marx dismissed the Utopian Socialists as dreamers whose schemes were based on wishful thinking rather than a realistic understanding of history and society. In place of their ideal communities, he sought to develop what he called a scientific theory of social change based on economic forces and class conflict. This theory became known as communism, and it would have a far greater impact on world history than any of the utopian experiments that preceded it.